We shall now continue. Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. While still very young and still a child, we cannot earn our welcome in the world. Yet we seem to sense whether we are, in fact, welcome or not. The reassurance of seeing ourselves intensely reflected in the faces of caregivers, in our mother's arms, the pleasure of hearing sounds and words of love and some encouragement, that all these indeed confirm that we are welcome. This may quite easily be the reason why, in societies wherein children are loved most, very secure and confident people are produced. In later parts of childhood, we tend to discover more external self-esteem, which in psychology is called situational, and which happens from knowing that we are good at something while meeting others' expectations. Our parents, teachers, school teams, you name it. There comes the satisfaction with new abilities, new interactions, and communion with others, increased curiosity about all kinds of things, with which we certainly satisfy our senses. I have once formulated and formed a space and rocket club when I was in high school. But many cultures do not foster core self-esteem, and then ration out the situation being approved in return for obeying, fitting in, serving the parents or group's purpose, and doing things which are always assigned instead of chosen, can create children who feel that there must be something wrong with their own abilities and interests. This is where the psychologists call a situation as false self. This was the case in Middle Eastern countries in general, as I have directly experienced. This way, a small boy is probably told impossible things as to take care of your mom or be the man of the house. It's been almost humiliated for showing his vulnerability and or worshipped for a superiority. He knows it's unreal, and those boys learn narcissism, and the girls are discouraged from exploring or being punished for willfulness or praised for assuming docility. But she would feel and begin to construct a deflated self, resulting in a female problem of depression. This trend is discovered also in the Bible Belt traditions of USA. Although these precious expectations can be impossible to resist, even for those young ones, with the correct piece of love and teamwork, success is then guaranteed. For those who don't have that sort of a base, it may not even be possible to go underground to continue the sense of a true self behind the false creations. In response to a situation of approval can only completely fill resulting emptiness inside and within the community somehow becomes powerful, that can be exploited to make people of any age work or serve, compete, and go against their true self-interests. Cultures, for the main emphasis is to create an enroll, obedience, or just fitting in, and who cannot develop or reward child's full circle of unique talents, can only penalize themselves in the long run. However, without that feeling of value, it would be almost impossible for children to survive the process of failure and perhaps trying again. It becomes more difficult to enjoy success once they achieve them or support the successes of others. When the core self-esteem remains low even into adulthood, no external task to achieve or approve seems to be able to come close to compensate. You need to examine the past as an emotional black hole in which external rewards completely disappear, which of course is why the lack of such self-esteem can produce totalitarian leaders for whom no amount of powers are enough. And the same can be said for those who are able to create grandiose amounts of money or spending the inherited money for no amount is enough, and the authoritarian parents for whom no obedience is complete. But some sense of feeling, or worse still, it is a survival of harsh hardships. The need for supporting core self-esteem needs not to end in childhood, because some adults still need the so-called unconditional love from friends, family, partners, animals, and even an all-forgiving deity. Love may declare, no matter how the world may judge you, I love you for being you. But there was a deficit at the core. There needs to be an appropriate one to childhood which will constrict or dominate adult life. In any patriarchal family situation, inexpressive or withholding fathers can be much the result of values and jobs that keep men from taking equal care of small children, that both abnormal results are often assumed to be normal. Then who keeps seeking approval from parental authority discovers, and women who keep on looking to their husbands or lovers for fathering or support. This kind of self-esteem does not retain or remain divided from the situation. Like two sources flowing into one, they are separate only at the beginning, but self-esteem, like everything else, is developmental. If the personal self inside each child is ignored or punished at the age of 2 or 4 or 6, some part of humans remain 2 or 4 or 6 until they return, recognizing what happened and to repair themselves. It is similar to what Hemingway wrote in his Farewell to Arms. The world breaks everyone. And afterward, some are strong at the broken places. But those places do not always get broken. When they do, however, they hurt more in the reset. And in fact, they take longer to repair. There is a problem in societies that produce obedience by withholding the self-esteem, and therefore they are very likely to discourage its repair and healing. The idea alone of the worst is very dangerous to authoritarian systems and to incomplete democracies that is condemned as selfish, even godless, counter-revolutionary, egocentric, and any other epithet which puts the person in the room at all times. I know my experience with my own family, who became Jehovah's Witnesses, and my children have considered me likewise, always wrong and not worth considering. They also considered me as not deserving, not earned their respect, and that they cannot even work. Are you asked, or have you been ever asked the question as they did, why should he continue to strive? What needs to be remembered? That it was in our infancy, and perhaps in our early childhood, a time during which we were most likely to feel unconditionally loved, and that we stretched our abilities more than at any other time. We need no rewards for learning to crawl or be penalized and punished for not standing or for walking, even for breathing the air. We need not be given any orders to explore the world around us or compete in speaking our first words. They were learned for the joy of accomplishments and stretching our abilities, choosing what we wanted to do in life, expanding the limits of our bodies and our minds without any falsehood and probably with great risk, or afforded was a reward in itself, as it still is. There are people who are worried about laziness and the work ethics which are chosen versus being compelled to work, or the type of work for which we feel personal responsibility and pride. The fact is that, like every other part of nature, we have an internal imperative to grow. There is certainly enough sunlight and water, and they are available at the deep roots of self-esteem, and indeed as it was. The young ones can withstand the terrible storms. If we will tell you so much has been blamed on parents, would you believe? Especially mothers. However, we need to be more compassionate in thinking about parenting. There are many abuses and in the outside world to deal with. But probably it has helped us and our children to flourish, as it is within their nature, and us to feel anger by bias instead of defeat, and us to feel the need to fight cruelty instead of looking for approval by becoming cruel as well. Be there for creating a criminal generation? Good question. Future child rearing theories, starting with parents' own childhood. Treating our children as well as we treat ourselves, we have to treat ourselves as well as we want to treat our children. Those with damaged childhood, whose needs are not recognized even today, as well as may get disastrously confused with the same as. Giving our children what we wanted and didn't have. Here the children would be treated like the parent instead of like themselves. Where wants and needs are ignored, and they are probably giving out what the parents wanted years ago. And this is still deprived in a child of the parent may feel of this present child and demand kind of compensation in the form of obedience or gratitude. I tell you one occasion which will probably make you laugh. After bathing our very first daughter, who was drying herself as a 6-year-old child in front of the open window. Seeing this, her mother shouted loudly, in a very frenetic manner, "Oh my God, how dare you stand in front of the open window naked? If the people would see you from downstairs on the road, they would think that it was I drying myself in front of the open windows and displaying myself." Making use of children to live out our adult lives. The father raising a son to have the profession he once dropped off. And a mother who is using her daughter as adult companion. Her husband is probably not. The parents urging their children into accomplishments as status symbols. All these and many more ways of subordinating a child's authentic self to a parent's needs. Justifying and normalizing one's own child's by doing to our own children precisely what was done to us, without a chance to go back, confront, examine, and heal, without a consciousness that what was done was wrong, undeserved, and not for your own good. As parents, humans tend to continue some version of abuse they themselves have experienced. As it was said, that we needed child of yesterday inside the parent is dominating the child of today. An English expert, W.D. Wall, in the early childhood education indicates, children grow well when their parents are growing well. How true and how correct. There are several books which might be most helpful for many expecting parents. Unfortunately, our world, within the so-called civilization, there are instances of abuse and neglect. Being whatever kind of person in a huge planet, however unprotected, by the so-called grown-up adults who were supposedly to protect us, may be enough to make us feel that we are not worth protecting. We do not need to win a competition of suffering in order to take our damage seriously. There is not to be a competition or tears. Tears or tears. Suffering is suffering. How a working father constantly looking at his watch or mobile, or the mother whose lover competes with us for her attention, can be as just damaging to our sense of being worthy. The most serious abuse, the more difficult it may be to confront. We might consider, my mother or my father could not possibly have done that to me. I must be imagining it. Memory may have been extracted from our consciousness in its entirety. However, the feelings remain alive, and these are unconscious, but can be uncovered. When we speak of abuse, let us not consider the ones we hear about often in the news, because other observed signs are the childhood convulsions for which there are definitely no medical reasons, or a totally inability to express anger. When judging destructive leaders or criminals, and which depends who made us suffer, tracing these roots to childhood strikes some people as soft, any vision or personal responsibility. If we want to diminish violence and not just punishing it, we have to take this very seriously for the evidence about those whose minds and actions are controlled and whose bodies are invaded in childhood are the most likely to continue hurting themselves and others. This type of violence may be extreme and obvious. It may simply be also traditional. This destructive trend can be seen in families following certain cults, as well as to hurt their child in the lack of discipline, and as parents often say, this is for your own good. This really is summing up the central tenets of child rearing manuals, especially in Germany. Although much admired in this country, as well through the first part of the century, some trends of abuses are still very familiar. It seems that the grown-ups are behaving like God, like masters of their dependent child, with surviving families, while the child is held responsible for their anger. This truly describes the teachings also of people like Jehovah's Witnesses, which my wife has fully displayed. Can you guess what this would lead the child into? Knowing that the child's will does not need to be broken as soon as possible. It is said that this has to happen at a very early age, so that according to the scriptural wisdom, your child will not leave the righteous pathway. Perhaps he or she would not even notice. Perhaps not be able to expose those so-called adult parents. There are many little experiences to learn from, which do not include the wisdom of the witnesses. Those beliefs were certainly very popular in the past, thanks to well-meaning German nannies everywhere, particularly in the United States, for their ability to produce discipline, which my German-born wife has also promoted under the careful direction of her only friends, the witnesses. Well, with this, I am intending to stop here for this session. We will meet again by the next episode. Until then, keep smiling and be happy. Thank you.